Professional athletes, whatever their chosen sport, are a different breed. The level of skill and expertise that they've developed and honed over a lifetime of dedication is obvious for all of us mere mortals to see, whether it's basketball, baseball, or any other sport. There are men and women out there that warm up with feats that 90% of the population can never hope to accomplish. But alongside the endless years of training, the hard yards on the running track, and the long hours in the gym, once these lucky few make it to the elite level in any sport, the rewards are worth it. The money that is splashed around by teams and organizations the world over is staggering, and if you can make your way to the top level of one of the big four sports in America, then there will be plenty of fame and fortune to reward you. So what happens when you get a group of people in the best shape of their life, with their names and faces known, and revered by fans and more money than they know what to do with? Well, sometimes they decide to kick back a little between games and enjoy themselves. And sometimes they really go all out and make the most of the excesses that are on offer to them. And that's where we're headed today, back to the 90s, to the NFL's very own Dallas Cowboys, and a man called Michael Irvin, but most importantly, his infamous White House. Excessive partying amongst sports superstars has been pretty common over the years. That heady mix of celebrity and money, as well as their punishing schedule, gives them the opportunity and means to kick back and blow off steam to levels that are pretty much impossible for us mere mortals. We can look at Dennis Rodman, the Chicago Bulls standout that played in their most successful franchise run of all time. And all the time he was burning the candle at both ends. Excesses of every sort imaginable, fines, and reprimands were all interspersed with continuous and nearly constant success. In the U.S., the examples are almost too many to name. Ovechkin keeping the party going for days after his team finally lifted the Stanley Cup, pictured with it in his home, and still evidently drunk days after the success. Or what about the Minnesota Vikings and their so-called boat party scandal, where 17 members of the team were implicated in a party that took place on 2 houseboats and had over 100 attendees. While modern NFL players have been known to enjoy a beer or two, with Rob Gronkowski potentially leading the way in recent times, we need to head back a couple of decades to see an era where decadence and excess were really in full swing. Michael Irvin was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, excelling in football from a young age. He was a wide receiver. He was 6'2" tall and weighing 207 pounds fully grown. He was a force to be reckoned with on the field. Not only was he fast, agile, and possessed a keen knowledge of the game, the sheer size and power that he brought to the role made him a force of nature. He grew up as one of 17 siblings. His mother was a homemaker, and his dad worked as a roofer during the week and preached on the weekends. Michael dropped out of school to work as a roofer himself briefly before football paved the way for him. He attended the University of Miami, where he excelled in the team and showed every bit of promise that would guide his career. When the 1988 draft came around, no one was surprised when he was a first-round pick. Michael was selected 11th overall and joined the Dallas Cowboys, the team that he would play with the entirety of his 12-season career. And the personal stat line he built and the records he set during his tenure were nothing short of impressive. By the time it was all said and done, Michael Irvin pulled down 750 receptions for just under 12,000 total yards and scored 65 touchdowns. He made 5 separate Pro Bowl appearances, and when the All-Decade team was announced for the 90s, it was little surprise to anyone that he made the cut. The man was simply built different. He got his nickname Playmaker for his ability to alter the outcomes of games with his brilliance, and it was a name that he seemed to enjoy. He went as far as buying a personalized license plate that spelt it out and drove around town with it on his vehicle. But in a team sport like football, no matter how talented one man is, they need a team around them to achieve any sort of success. And Michael Irvin was on one of the most impressive teams of the era. Let's talk briefly about the Dallas Cowboys of the 1990s. When Michael joined the Cowboys in 1988, they weren't really making many moves in the league. His first year, they threw up a losing record of 3-13 under head coach Tom Landry. The next year was even worse, when they managed only a single win the entire season with Jimmy Johnson at the helm. However, A few key acquisitions were about to turn the tide and change the landscape of Dallas football for the best part of the next decade. 1990 would mark a turning point where the first glimmers of what was to come could be seen. They went 7-9 that year, and in 91 managed a winning record, going 11-5 before losing the divisional playoffs. 1992 marked the first Super Bowl win for Irvin after going 13-3 in the regular season. They repeated the feat in 93, becoming back-to-back champions, but lost the divisional playoffs in 94 under Barry Switzer before winning the Super Bowl again in 95. 3 Super Bowl wins in 4 years, seemingly out of nowhere. As is customary, the winners of the Super Bowl get invited to the White House in Washington, D.C., and have the opportunity to meet the president. But there was a second, very different White House that commanded a lot more infamy for the Cowboys during this era. It would be unfair to say that Michael Irvin was the only member of his team that partied hard. In fact, he was surrounded by others who played just as hard as he did and liked the party even harder afterwards. This group of players, however, felt like they had a problem. Where could they really enjoy themselves and stay out of the public eye? They needed a place where they could kick back with reckless abandon and not worry about the eyes of the public or the prying press trying to stick their noses in. The solution would come in the form of an unassuming 5-bedroom house located on Dorset Drive. It was only a few hundred yards away from one of the Cowboys' training facilities and sported 3.5 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, and to the players, a world of opportunity. One of the players, Alvin Harper, leased out the otherwise unassuming building, and the others chipped in to deck it out with everything you could ever want in a party house. A spa, a pool table, massive televisions everywhere, and if the rumors are to be believed, secret cameras installed in every room by none other than the president of the White House, Michael Irvin. Once the players had paid for drinks, entertainment, and anything else they thought they could ever need, it seemed like everything else was in place. The last thing they needed was for the women to show up, and that became the easy part. Initially, they would go out their usual spots and handpick a few women they were interested in and invite them over to the house for a good time. But as the place's reputation grew, they soon found that plenty showed up without needing to be asked. The parties were wild, loud, and excessive in every way imaginable. Exactly how wild were these parties? Let's hear it from Irvin's own long-term assistant, Anthony Paco Montoya, who had a first-hand experience of the most extreme excesses. Nobody partied like them. Fights, women, drinking, orgies. I'll just say this. If there would have been smartphones and social media back then, the Cowboys wouldn't have been able to field a team come Sunday. While you might be wondering how a bunch of famous football players could hold such impressively decadent gatherings mere streets away from their own training ground and not have it splashed all over the press, the answer is surprisingly simple. It wasn't that the journalists and pressmen didn't know about the White House. Quite the opposite, in fact. It was a bit of an open secret, but there was an unofficial code of silence about it. The reality was that whoever decided to out the party house and expose these gatherings, well, they might get a couple more eyeballs on their publication in the short term, but overall they would lose. If they were the ones that brought these megastars into the public eye for their debauchery, what are the chances of their paper ever getting an interview with them again? Practically zero. So, they collectively decided to keep their mouths shut, and the White House continued to play host to every sort of decadence under the sun, at least for a while. But it wouldn't be too long before the whole affair blew up in their faces. It started with Michael Irvin and Alfredo Roberts getting caught with multiple different drugs in a hotel room and a pair of women. Both were charged with various offenses, and this one did make the papers. It was a bad look for both players involved and the organization as a whole. On the one hand, the hotel bus justified every reason the players had for establishing the White House. It was a place where they didn't have to risk being exposed in random hotels, clubs, or bars. It was their own personal private place. But once the two men were charged and the sanctions started to come in from both the team's management, the law, and the NFL itself, something shifted in the press minds. The players were informed that someone was going to publish a piece on the White House. Someone had infiltrated one of the parties and was going to run with the story at the worst possible time. Despite being called by a teammate and pre-warned, Michael Irvin didn't believe that the jig was up until a piece ran in the local newspaper a couple weeks later.
I remember Leon Lett called me one time.
Yeah.
Leon Lett called me. He said,
Big Cat.
Big Cat. Thank God. Big Cat, great dude, man. He's defensive line coach for the Dallas Cowboys now. He called me and said, Playmaker. I said, what's up, big fella? He said, hey, man, I heard we've been infiltrated. We need to close down the White House. I said, this ain't no damn movie. Yeah, you been watching too much. They ain't closing down nothing. What's wrong with you? I'm not closing down the White House.
With potential charges still looming over Michael Irvin's head for the hotel room fiasco, this piece came out and detailed exactly what the White House was, where it was located, the players that spent their time there, and what went on in it. And the reaction from the public was, well, fairly indifferent. It was nothing new for athletes to party in the way that they had been described. After all, they were a winning franchise and needed some time to blow off steam. There were no accusations of any criminality or anything illegal, so there wasn't a huge amount of blowback from the public. Cowboys owners and managers, however, saw things a little differently. Jerry Jones was the main man behind the Dallas Cowboys. He was the general manager, the president, and the owner. Taking over in 1989, he has held the position since, and when the White House became public knowledge, he pulled Michael Irvin into his office. Irvin's explanation or excuse, whatever you want to call it, remains legendary to this day.
So a few weeks later, I'm sitting in meetings. I'm like, here we getting ready for games, putting in the plays. Jerry calls me over to the room, goes to the office. I said, what? I said, like, what? I said, come on, man, I'm meeting. I said, I get late. He said, no, he wants to see you now. Yeah, I went over. I said, what's up, boss? He said, Michael, there's a story breaking about some White House you had. He said, you know what I tell you now? As long as you tell me the truth, I can fight for you. But you got to give me the truth. What's with this story? How much truth to it? I was stunned for a minute there. I just kind of think like, okay. He said, tell him the truth. I'm going to tell him the truth. He said, what were you guys doing here? I said, boss, let me tell you. We were trying to do the wrong thing the right way.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
That was a beautiful answer. I thought, and it's the truth. We were trying to do the wrong thing the right way.
Yeah.
To try to stay out of trouble,
Yep.
save a little money. Yeah. You don't have to. I thought it was a brilliant plan, actually. A couple guys throwing a couple $100 every month, and we got use of a home, big old house, 5-bedroom house. It was laid. It was laid everywhere.
Legal ramifications soon landed for the hotel room. A plea of no contest let Michael off with a $10,000 fine to pay and community service. For their part, the NFL handed him a 5-game suspension, ensuring he'd miss the start of the '96 season. In 1999, Michael Irvin would retire from professional football without ever playing a single game for any other team other than the Cowboys. He took a hard hit when playing the Eagles and suffered a bad back injury. He would later say that he was lucky to not have been paralyzed. His professional career on the field was over. Michael Irvin went on to work for the NFL Network on air and was inducted into the Hall of Fame. His impressive on-field exploits and his record of success speak for themselves, and he is still viewed as one of the most important players for the Dallas Cowboys during their success in the '90s. But despite all his accolades, achievements, and successes, to a select few, he will always be most remembered as the president of the White House.